All right. Felipe Sierra is our next speaker. And again, that's kind of how we got connected through the princess. She allowed me to kind of get Felipe to give a wonderful presentation in Brazil last year. And now the princess is here, so it kind of full circle. The world kind of works in interesting ways. So anyways, Felipe, I'm going to give, you know what? I'll make you do, I'll give you this, and I'll help you with your computer. Okay, yeah. There you
go. All right, so I'll start earlier so he doesn't cut my time. But I cannot start really without my slides. Is it, it's not on? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's difficult to open. There you got it. All right.
Remember, this is not technical difficulties. This is just setup, okay? So everything is working, right? So the gods have blessed us. Yep, you're good. Okay.
All right. So. As you see from my age, I'm going to start with a little bit of history. Not much. So just bring you back to 2013, 13 years ago. I think it was a great year for aging biology. That was the year that, Lopez Otin and the group in Europe published the famous hallmarks of aging that had a dramatic effect on getting the field together. The same year, we published from the Geroscience interest group at NIH, we published the concept of Geroscience. And that same year was the first epigenetic clock by Steve Horvath. So not bad for a single year. 3 things that really moved the field a lot, all right? So what are we trying to move? This is a favorite painting Picasso painted when he was 15. It blows my mind that he could paint this at 15. But anyway, this is the traditional role of a physician. Take care of the sick and dying people. And we want to change that. We want people to not get sick and die. Oh, it's this little thing. There's a big thing and there's a little thing. Okay, little thing. So this is what we're trying to change. Put in another way, the traditional role of a geriatrician is to look for people who are deceased and try to keep them from dying from that disease. The problem is that these diseases all come together. As we get old, we get multimorbidity, and curing one will not help you much. You might live longer because you were supposed to die and you didn't. But you're sick. You have bad health. So the whole goal of Geroscience, which is what I'll be talking about actually, is to find the common cause that drives all the diseases. And that obviously is the aging process. Why was this possible in 2013? It's simply because the field realized there was enough information to start thinking about translation. That's why the hallmarks were developed, actually in parallel with what we were working at the NIH. So this is the approach that we want to take, and this is just very simply, that's the Geroscience hypothesis. So basically, if aging is at the core of all these diseases, then if we can reduce the rate of aging, we're going to automatically reduce the rate of all the diseases. That's the concept. But it turns out that it's not only the diseases. There's a lot of other things that are not disease per se, frailty, fragility, and things like that. You're going to reduce those too. And this is where I want to focus now, because I think that we have to change a little bit the paradigm. The initial goal of Geroscience, and this is how I described it when we came up with it, was to link aging biology to disease. And I think 13 years later, we should change this because the goal should be to link aging biology to health. Not to disease, but to health. The problem, how do we measure health? We don't know how to do that. And I will give you a little bit of background on that. So I think a couple of years later, in 2016, no, I can't read from here, 2016, I think, yeah. John Beard from the World Health Organization published this intrinsic capacity. So basically you age because of intrinsic capacities, your own, and because of your environment. And those are the things that drive your rate of aging. So what attracted me about this is that it is focused on health. It's not focused on disease. It's the goal, I find the goal to be fantastic. The goal is to identify the biological functions that allow an individual to continue doing what he or she values the most. Okay? So one thing is to have cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever. In my case, to continue doing what I like, I need not to get arthritis. Because I paint, I play the guitar. Okay? Arthritis will kill me internally. Will not kill me, but it will diminish my quality of life. So this focus on health rather than disease is what's very important. And just to give you an example, so this is how they're measured, and there's a lot of measurements in there. The problem we have is that because biomedicine has always focused on disease and never on health, all of these measures are developed to measure disease. So they have a ceiling effect that's very bad. So if you're 30, or you're 40, or you're 50, you're still gonna do it, right? They're not meant for younger people. But nevertheless, this can be measured, and I just want, this is, I think, the only data that I'm gonna show. This is a study published by John Beard, which is, to me, is very interesting. So in blue, you see people who were born in the 1950s, then in the 1940s, 1930s, and 1920s, okay? So if you look at the intrinsic capacity, and this is done in two big cohorts in China and the UK, you look at the top line in here, is the decrease in intrinsic capacities, which is what you're supposed to get, between 60 and 70. They don't have further because that's my generation, we're not 80 yet. And you see it going down. But what's amazing is if you look at the next line, is those born in 1940. So 1 decade earlier, their capacity is already much, much less. So we're increasing our intrinsic capacities dramatically. And that is very important for health. Of course, the same happens with the previous cohorts. And this is not just the total intrinsic capacities. It happens with all the domains of intrinsic capacity. And there's a lot that can be analyzed on this. I'm not going to go into the details. But the thing is, yes, we can measure health. And that's an important advance. So the question then becomes, how do we correlate these intrinsic capacities with the hallmarks of aging? They might be correlated, right? So I took here the 5 intrinsic capacity domains, cognition, locomotion, psychological, etc. And I just picked 5 of the hallmarks of aging. And the problem is that, yes, you can start doing correlations. And you find correlations. Everything correlates with everything if you look hard enough. So you find that metabolism can affect cognition, locomotion, psychological, etc. And locomotion will affect metabolism, inflammation. You can get all of these relationships. Are they important? Are we advancing science by doing this? Really? By looking at correlations without looking at the cause behind them? And actually, it's much worse than what I have in here, because you don't measure epigenetics, you don't measure cognition, you measure some domains of that area. So you can measure DNA methylation, histone modifications, transposons, etc. So there's several subdomains on it. And if you think about each one of these has that, I didn't feel like drawing all those lines. It's just, you can do correlations for the rest of your life. You'll get papers. You'll get well known for publishing a lot. But are you advancing science? No. And then, of course, then you had to add the diseases. And there's correlations again. Correlations and correlations and correlations. What are we doing there? So this is just a note of caution. So what we need, really, is to try to simplify this. So there is correlations, but how do the biology of aging relate to intrinsic capacities? What's the common ground? And I'm proposing, together with my collaborator Viviana Perez, that the loss of resilience is the common cause. Now, the loss of resilience, I mean, if you think about it, you have frailty, you have disease. We have studied those things a lot, okay? Why are we focusing on resilience? For two reasons. First, frailty and disease happen much later in life. Loss of resilience happens early. If you're 40, you know you don't have the same resilience as you had when you were 30. Yet you're not frail, you're not diseased. Again, we come to the issue of the upper limits of the measurements. So that's the main reason why I think resilience is the driver. But there's also another reason. At the end, we all die. Frailty will happen to some of us. Clinically measured frailty will happen to some of us. Disease will happen to some of us, not to all. Loss of resilience will happen to all of us. So that's why I feel that that's more the kernel of the problem. So basically, we propose that resilience is a transducer between aging biology and intrinsic health. So when I drew this figure for the Geroscience interest group, I'm very proud that without thinking much, I put them all relating to each other, because everyone affects the others. So actually, a system is more like a systems biology situation where any of the hallmarks of aging will affect the other hallmarks of aging. And what I'm proposing then is that resilience is what at the core of transducing the molecular drivers into physiological outcomes. Basically, because of all of these things interact with each other, there could be a particular driver that's bad for one person individual. It could be the metabolism, it could be DNA, protein quality control. But because of the interactions, all of these things, when they fail, will result on a decreased resilience. And that decreased resilience, in turn, will drive changes in your intrinsic capacities and eventually to disease. Okay, so this is what I'm proposing here. So again, the task ahead is now to correlate aging biology to intrinsic capacities and to resilience, all three. But don't start making correlations, because those will not help. We have to find out how it happens. So a lot of work is being done on the current field is all focused on certain things. They're focused on biomarkers, omics measurements, and clocks. I would say that these are important areas. We have to do them, but beware of how important they are. The omics works. Yes, a lot of work is being done. We are learning a lot, but not as much as we claim we are. Basically, you do omics on this and that, and you find that 365 genes go up, 284 go down, and you go to GO terms, and is the mitochondria Well, okay, fine, but what's behind all of that? Unfortunately, people tend to do that and then do it in another scenario where they get other genes, but they don't go any further. That's the danger of doing just omics. The clocks have been very useful. Are they perfect? No, not at all. They don't do what they're purported to do, but they're very important because they're driving the field into some areas that we did not consider before. And clocks actually are one of the things that come out of the multiple omics. In terms of biomarkers, that's another thing that, yes, we absolutely need biomarkers. That has always been the case. We cannot talk about aging if we don't have a way to measure it. So there had been some significant progress recently. I'm just showing a few things here, the nonlinear pattern of aging biomarkers, the fact that different tissues age at different rates, which actually made me have to retire one of my old slides that said that you can measure your risk for Alzheimer's from your belly button. No, the belly button doesn't age at the same rate as my brain. Okay, but that's a different story. And females are different from males, and I'm not talking only about hormones. I mean, there's a lot of biology behind that we need to understand. So where we need to do more research in other areas that are very important, and I feel that the push for omics on everything is leaving behind the questions about the biology behind. So we know a lot about circadian rhythms and what affects them, but measuring just that is not enough. We had to get more into the details of what drives the circadian rhythm, why does it change with age, what do we get out of that? Okay, and of course it has applications, like somebody mentioned yesterday, it's important when in the day you get a drug. So you give a drug to a nocturnal mouse in the morning when you are awake. Well, maybe it's very different for us. Maybe we need to do it in the morning, but maybe we need to do it at night, right? That type of questions need to be asked. The extracellular matrix has been mentioned several times, but there's not enough research into that area, I feel. Fibrosis is a very, very common thing in the elderly, and we need to investigate that a little bit more. And another area, again, sex differences, and again, I insist, not just the hormones that Steve likes, but you know, this model that Dina Dual has with 4 core genes that exchange the X and the Ys in the mice, very interesting work that needs to be explored more. More than anything, we need clinical trials. And we need clinical trials that are focused on aging. We do a lot of micro clinical trials. Micro, just to check little things. We're not getting anywhere with that. We need to get real clinical trials to test the geroscience hypothesis, to test multiple things. Of course, that's expensive, and that's a problem, but we have to be aware that we need that. So, in summary, I think that there's a need to change the way we see biomedicine. The classical medicine has always focused on the disease, on the negative aspects of health. So focus on disease, comorbidity, dependency, all of those bad things, okay? While the proposal of geroscience is to focus in the more positive side, so frailty, intrinsic capacities, resilience. So focus on health, okay? In summary, I told you that geroscience needs to focus on health, not on diseases, but on health. That intrinsic capacities is a valuable health indicator that we can use. Molecular resilience I propose as a unifying driver. That's not proven by any means. It's what I'm proposing that should be. And the most important thing, never mind the diseases. Don't worry about the diseases. They're just one side effect of aging that affect a part of the population, not the whole population. If you cure one disease, you're not really helping that much. You're just living longer with all the other diseases. So there's limited amount on that. So by all means, we need to treat the diseases. I'm not saying no, right? If you get a disease, yes, you should. But the focus of your research should be on health, not on the diseases. And with that, I think I'm done.
And Aubrey pointed out, and you'll have to tell me, Aubrey, how many diseases did you have up on your slide? Remember all the diseases? How many was that? Like 100, 200, something like that? What was that? And that was just a subset. How many? I mean, there's hundreds, right? Right, and exactly I agree with Felipe. Let's just stop growing old and we won't get any of that stuff, right? I mean, let's focus on the root cause. I'm not sure who talked about the root cause, but I believe yesterday the root cause was brought up as maybe we should address the root cause instead of like the 1,000 other things that happen, during the aging process. Okay, you know what, Aubrey. And by the way, one other thing, while the speakers are up here, and our technical wizard pointed this out, please don't do this, knock this against this because it shows up on the video, so please separate them. Thank you, and I should have, that was my fault, I'm sorry, Felipe, I should have. That's on me, not on you. Okay, here we go.
I think you should incorporate an Aubrey question for every presentation.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so Aubrey, don't do this. Okay, here we go, separate hands. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Yeah. So of course I very strongly agree with your overall thesis and the idea that aging causes decline in function, and this is detectable earliest at the level of resilience, and then intrinsic capacity, and then diseases and activities of daily living and so on. But I'm curious about that study that you mentioned early on in your talk that showed that 70 is the new 80, or sorry, 80 is the new 70, that's right. Because one would expect, surely, that a change in how much intrinsic capacity one has at a given chronological age should be reflected in increasing lifespan or increasing age at which one gets chronic diseases. And so my question is really, well, first of all, do you really believe that study? But secondly, do you think it would be possible or valuable, or indeed are you aware it's already been done, to do the same thing for resilience, to measure whether people's resilience is better at the same chronological age, depending on what cohort they're in?
That's a great question, Aubrey. Thank you. I'm going to pass this on to, or pass it back to Felipe, and he can answer that. And now he has better instructions from the person who has to figure this stuff out. There you go. Separate hands. There you go.
Separate hands.
Separate
Okay.
hands.
Thanks, Aubrey. Yeah, I absolutely agree with your first comment. How is it possible that we're doing so much better, but it doesn't reflect on increased longevity or increased health, actually? So it is a question. I do believe the paper is well done because I know what they're measuring, but it is very, very surprising. Okay, so let's start with that. In terms of measuring resilience, that's something I didn't get into. Yeah, I'm pushing for resilience, but we have no idea how to measure it, right? We cannot measure resilience in humans because you have to, in the person, because you have to stress him. And when I'm talking about resilience, I'm talking about molecular resilience. I neglected to mention that as well. Yeah, but that's where I'm going. So we do have measures of resilience, right, at the physiological level. But what I would like to do, I'm a biochemist by training, so what I would like to do is to have things to measure your resilience in terms of the multiple hallmarks of aging. How you measure your resilience to aggregated proteins, how you measure your resilience to radiation, right? So the idea would be to do it in people, but you cannot do that to people, give them chemotherapy, right? Just for this. But the answer actually came from Brandon, the thing of using the direct transformation, or whatever it's called, when you take iPS cells without passing through it. Transdifferentiation, that's right. Thank you. That could be the answer. However, while they keep, and Brandon said, they keep the genomic and expression patterns of young or old, I don't know if they keep at the individual level, if yours are different from mine. That still remains to be seen. So we don't know how to measure it, really.
Great question, Aubrey. Thank you. Yes, Princess Haya. I'll hold this for you.
Thank you, Felipe. I've had a lot of discussions about this previously. I have a question for you. When you mentioned that multi-omics data, making sense of multi-omics data in terms of genetic or genetic expression, if it's high or if it's low, and the quality of data that you were talking about, is the issue that you're seeing for us to understand this data, is it the issue of how we collected the data, meaning we don't have a lot of longitudinal studies that show different measurements at different times? Is that a gap, or is it we don't have the tools that can help us understand the relationship between some of the results that we see, or is it all of the above? It would be very interesting to know your views and what is actually missing for us to understand this data. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. I just want to add to this. I believe in the 50s or 60s, there was the Baltimore longitudinal study that was started up. But another thing I want to mention, and Joan will be talking about this later on today regarding data, and there's a wealth of data there in hospitals. In fact, my collaborator, Paul Benker, in the back, going to put up your hand, Paul? Okay, thank you. There's a wealth of data that's buried literally in the basements of hospitals, and they're digitizing. That goes back all the way to the 1800s to today. That could be used by us to understand, these longitudinal issues. I just want to point that out to you. So I'll go ahead and if you could answer the question from the princess. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. As Steve said, we do have a lot of longitudinal data. We need more longitudinal studies in terms of better characterized cohorts and things like that. So there's no question that we need more of this longitudinal data. But we have a lot of longitudinal data banked, as you say, in hospitals or in studies like BLSA, etc. What I was trying to warn about is just a simple issue that people stop there. Yes, you can take all the BLSA samples and do proteomics on all of them. Well, go further. You stop there. That's the problem that we have, is that people stop there. Because there are people who, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but there are people who specialize on doing that. They know that technique very well, and they do it in this sample, you do it in that sample, and in that sample, but they don't go any further into the biology. I think that's the danger that we're facing. I think that we're producing more data than we can analyze, really. And you have to analyze, you have to go a little bit further and understand the biological basis for what you're saying.
All right, thank you, Felipe. That were great questions. Thanks so much. Please give a round of applause to Felipe. Thank you so much. And our next